Unfortunately, the chair is on vacation and the vice chair can't be with us because of a conflict. So we'll have to name someone to chair the meetings.
I'll make a motion that Commissioner Whitesides chairs our briefing and meeting this evening.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Well, we'll go along with the meeting. Have you reviewed the agenda? Do we need any changes? If not, we'll go ahead and start with the staff updates. And I think, Tyler, you'll kick us off.
Well, good afternoon, Commissioners. So today is just a presentation providing an overview of the state CDBG DR community infrastructure grant opportunity. So this will be an early planning discussion. We're just looking for feedback on the proposed projects that we have developed so far, and we'll continue to refine these projects between now and the next time that we come before you, which will be in the month for the public hearing, and then the following month for authorization to submit. So to provide some additional context, this program is one of North Carolina's overall CDBG allocations following Tropical Storm Helene. While most of the funding is dedicated to housing recovery, the state also established several competitive grant opportunities for broader recovery needs, including commercial districts, workforce housing, and public infrastructure, which is what we're focused on today. The Community Infrastructure Program is one of the largest of those opportunities and provides funding to restore public facilities and infrastructure while improving long-term community resilience. The first funding round makes approximately $55 million available statewide, with individual projects capped at $15 million. One of the state's biggest priorities is project readiness, and they're looking for projects that are well-developed, address documented disaster recovery needs, and can move efficiently into implementation. The first round NOFO also establishes scoring priorities and details specific ineligible activities by project type, with parks and recreation facilities, roads, utility, and infrastructure receiving the strongest emphasis and priority and bonus points in scoring, and activities such as EOCs and related and other activities related to routine maintenance are not allowed. As with every CDBG-DR program, each proposed project must demonstrate three things: a clear tie back to Helene, compliance with the HUD national objective, and eligibility under the state's action plan. Meeting those requirements establishes eligibility, but staff has also focused on identifying projects that align with the county's long-term recovery priorities, address documented unmet needs, and are competitive under the state scoring criteria. The application timeline is relatively short. Staff has already been coordinating with the state through the pre-screening process to advance project development. Over the next several weeks, we'll continue refining project scopes, preparing application materials, and coordinating with our internal departments and project partners before returning to the board next month. After evaluating a number of potential concepts, staff has identified three projects that currently appear to be the strongest candidates for the first round of funding. Together, these projects address three different recovery priorities: so restoring public facilities, enabling affordable housing, and strengthening the county's resilience during future disasters. First project was selected because it addresses one of the county's most visible unmet recovery needs, while also aligning well with the state's scoring priorities. Facilities throughout the park system experience a significant amount of storm damage, and although FEMA and insurance will help with portions of the recovery, important gaps still exist. Rather than simply rebuilding damaged facilities, this proposal focuses on restoring parks in a way that improves resilience, accessibility, and long-term service. The second project is the Ferry Road infrastructure to enable affordable housing. It's one of the county's most significant recovery challenges is housing. So this proposal isn't about building the housing directly. Instead, it provides the public infrastructure needed to support approximately 645 future affordable housing units and expands affordable housing opportunities in a safer location outside the floodplain. The final one is community resiliency at county-owned facilities. And so the goal is to provide comprehensive and permanent power and redundancy systems for county critical facilities so that the county may still provide those services in and during future events. So I want to begin by emphasizing that the projects presented today are not intended to be a final or exhaustive list. These are projects that staff believe are the best position for the first round of funding based on eligibility, readiness, and competitiveness. At the same time, we're continuing to evaluate additional recovery needs and project concepts that may better be suited for the future community infrastructure funding opportunities. As we've done throughout the Helene recovery process, we'll continue refining our strategy and new funding, as new funding becomes available. This slide is just for your reference for any discussion or comments that you may have. It just brings together the three projects and displays how they address the tie back to the storm, the national objective that they may meet, and eligibility.
And so these are the three that you're ready for with round one, that you're well positioned for with these.
Correct.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, these look good. These certainly are the items we've talked about consistently, and it seems to tie in with what's being requested from the state and things that we need to get accomplished. Certainly, we know that housing is one of those, so I'm glad to see the Ferry Road in there, and hopefully there'll be some funding that comes through to help with that. When did you say that you think the next round will come, potentially?
We don't have an exact date from the state yet. It's anticipated that I'll back up. I can actually move over to the next slide, or back to the timeline. So the due date for submission is September 8th. They'll probably take about a month or 1 to 2 months to review and then announce preliminary awards. The anticipated timeline for when we would see final contracting would be probably between October and January. During the preliminary award process, that's when we'll have additional things that we'll have to accomplish at the request of state, like environmental reviews and another public hearing.
And then, do you all have some things in the pipeline that you're thinking about for the next round as well?
Yeah, so any project that would be eligible for or meet the eligibility criteria for the current round, we can go ahead and develop those through the pre-screening process and be in constant communication with the state in review. And then we're also anticipating that the second round for this opportunity would be announced prior to the end of the year, prior to final contracting actually occurs for the first round.
And then since we're submitting three, what's the likelihood that we'd be able to get all three through this first round, or is it more that we're submitting these and then more than likely we'll have to go submit some of them again in the second round? Or are we fairly optimistic that there's potential for all three?
We're remaining fairly optimistic.
I like that.
Thanks to that. And sorry, Commissioner Wells,
Go ahead.
I think I have a related question. I'm sorry if I missed it. In terms of the first gatekeeper to the eligibility and awarding these, is it NCEM? Is that the first line of review?
So it's actually through the state's DCR.
Commerce.
Yes.
Okay.
Commerce.
Okay. And it rests with them?
Yes.
Okay.
So the pre-screening process, we meet with DCR staff members for just general eligibility. Then they move the pre-screening to full application. And then they will also be the ones in the team, that will be reviewing the full applications.
The three we've submitted are excellent, I think. Now, if two are approved, or maybe I'm being over-optimistic, or even one, can we go back to the well with for the next round?
Yes.
Okay,
So anything that we submit that may not receive funding in the first round will still be eligible for the second round. The only thing that we don't have clarity on yet is if the state will assign any priorities. So for this current round, water and sewer gets 10 bonus points for the application. Parks will receive 7, and then anything related to roads and infrastructure, supporting roads will be 4 points.
okay, thanks.
So the only question I have is, well, two questions. For Ferry Road, are there unmet needs with Cox Avenue that are more pressing, or is there a reason we chose Ferry Road over Cox Avenue?
It's because of the readiness of the project itself. It's also because of where the gap is for Ferry Road. So for this specific opportunity, it's more related to the infrastructure to enable the development.
Got it. Okay. So Cox Avenue's in a better position right now, so Ferry Road's just has the need.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, also under ineligible, it says projects located in Buncombe County that are also located within the city of Asheville are not eligible.
That's right.
So that would be another reason.
Yeah.
Good point. And then my second question is that I know that the state currently has, through Renew, if this is the same thing, let me know, but there's a commercial district revitalization program application, community infrastructure program application, and a Helene debris recovery disposal grant. So I'm curious if there's an interplay between which projects we're putting forward for each one of those. And if you need time to answer that, I'm happy to discuss that later as well. But I wanted to flag those and see if there's an interplay.
Yeah, so we evaluated both grant opportunities. So but specifically like the community infrastructure and the commercial district, which is what we'll be presenting for the final applications this evening. Okay. And so we just looked at what projects were eligible and what the criteria were, and made the priorities based on the NOFOs that were made available by the state.
Okay, great. Thank you.
We have any more questions? Well, thank you. We appreciate it. Good report.
Thank you.
One quick question, and it may not tie in. For some reason, I'd written this note down. So the multifamily non-LaTeX, June 25th. I remember when I was looking through, I saw that somewhere, but was that on this?
I believe that's in the appendix.
Oh, maybe that's where it was.
Yeah, oh, there we go.
It's multifamily open June 25th. So I'm just curious, do we have any projects coming with that?
There she is.
Great question. We can't speak directly to the project, but we've shared the opportunity with the Ferry Road Master Development Partner, Urban Atlantic. Since developers are eligible applicants, they're taking a look and currently going through the pre-screening process. So while not a county staff project, we have shared with our team, and they're analyzing it and trying to make an application work.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Thanks.
Thank you.
Lacey?
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Afternoon.
I am here today to share a quarterly update for you all on the continuum of care and work around homelessness in the COC. I want to start out by reviewing closeout information from our most recent season of Code Purple. You can see at the top the funding that was committed was around $303,000 total, with Buncombe County contributing $50,000, City of Asheville contributing $50,000, and then the City of Asheville also utilized some ARPA funding that they had remaining, and Mission made a donation of $75,000. After administrative costs, there was about $69,000 of that available for providers. And then you can see our spending amounts here as well. And I want to just note that this slide does not include the emergency funding that was authorized as a result of one of the winter storms earlier this year. I'm going to share some information about that funding on the next slide for you all. You might remember that the funding structure for the fiscal year 26 effort was different from any previous years that we've done Code Purple before. So there was a per diem rate based on bed utilization per night, as well as half of the cost for the operations coordinator, which was a new role for Code Purple and Winter Shelter, was supported with Code Purple funding. So when we designed this funding structure, we did it with intention to support up to 95 nights of Code Purple this year at full bed utilization at each participating site. And so we ended up having 80 nights of Code Purple this year with an average use per night of 48 individuals and a maximum use on a single night of 133 individuals. I wanted to share here the providers that were assisting us with this, just as a reminder, but I also want to note that we had Safe Shelter offering nightly winter shelter beds this season, 40 for men and 10 for women. And they also ended up operating some overflow Code Purple capacity at First Presbyterian Church. As the season progressed and we identified that additional capacity was needed. None of the data that you see on this slide includes winter shelter data. So we actually supported, there were more folks who were supported through the winter from that effort with different funding sources. That service was very well utilized throughout the season, and the overflow location was operational the night of our maximum use of 133 individuals. So that is how we ended up at that number, even though our initial Code Purple beds was a lower one. Additionally, I just want to note that the overflow location was not supported with the funding that you see here. That was Safe Shelter, and every other Code Purple provider also supported the effort with their own funding as well. You may remember also that in addition to the just over $41,000 in regular Code Purple spending from Buncombe County, you likely recall that some additional funding was authorized when the need for additional Code Purple capacity was identified as a result of extreme cold temperatures in the daytime and precipitation the weekend of Winter Storm Gianna, which was that last weekend in January. Code Purple providers requested support for staffing for Code Purple shelters for daytime hours that weekend. Since Code Purple has historically been called only at nighttime, but there were very dangerous conditions for folks to be out in the weather during the day as well. And so as a result, the county and the city both approved a total of $8,753, splitting that evenly. So the county supported that with $4,376. In terms of the total contribution from Buncombe County for Code Purple efforts for fiscal year 26, we spent just under $46,000 this year. I also wanted to share an update on planning efforts for the upcoming season, which is currently underway. The COC's System Planning and Implementation Committee is leading this year's planning process. A request for proposal process was recently completed, and interested providers have been identified as part of that process, and the committee is meeting regularly with those providers now to work out the details for this year's upcoming season. The COC's funding committee has recommended following the same per diem funding structure again for this year's effort. And county staff is working on updates to the interlocal agreement that will modify our monitoring of the spend down. The Code Purple plan and the updated manual are anticipated for presentation to the COC board in August. So far, we've confirmed available funding. Buncombe County and the city of Asheville are each contributing $100,000. The city of Asheville also elected to carry over some funding from the previous effort, so that's why you see their total is $108,000. And they also had some remaining ARPA that they are contributing. And I just learned since completing these slides that Mission has confirmed that they will allow carry forward of $15,000 from last year's contribution as well.
So Lacey, question.
Sure.
So they're allowing the carry forward, but they're not planning on contributing this year?
They are contributing $100,000 and then they're carrying forward
I'm sorry.
$8,000.
Mission HCA.
Oh, sorry. I am not sure yet if they're planning another contribution this year as well. I think that lead agency staff is still working out those details with them, but they did confirm that they will carry forward $15,000 from last year. So I will be back with an update on the plan once it is adopted by the COC board for you all too, and it will have that information.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions about Code Purple? All right, I wanted to also share some funding updates. The first being an update on HUD Continuum of Care program funding. This is our COC's largest source of funding for homelessness support. In years past, this funding supported permanent supportive housing at Homeward Bound, rapid rehousing for survivors of domestic violence at Helpmate, as well as some HMIS support for the lead agency. You may remember me talking with you all last fall about a notice of funding opportunity that was released, which proposed pretty sweeping changes and a significant threat of loss of funding for these programs for our community and for communities across the country. So that notice of funding, which was released last fall, has been rescinded due to litigation. However, there is a new notice of funding opportunity for fiscal year 26, which covers calendar dates January 1st, 2027 through December. That was released on June 1st of this year, and again, we are seeing some pretty substantial changes within that NOFO. These changes reflect new national priorities from HUD centered around transitional housing and supportive services with required treatment programming included. Additionally, the funding structure is significantly different from years past. And because of that change in the funding structure, we are anticipating a loss of funding for some of those previously supported programs once again. And then also HUD's application and selection processes have changed significantly for this NOFO. So there is a lot of change to orient ourselves to and work through as we try to make our community's application as strong as possible. The COC is currently in the midst of the application process for this NOFO, and all COCs across the country are still awaiting some crucial details from HUD regarding available funding amounts for each community. But based on what we know already, funding for permanent supportive housing has been functionally capped, and Tier 1 renewal funding will not be sufficient to fully support previously funded programs. Because we don't know the exact amount that will be available to us yet for Tier 1, I can't yet give you a definitive amount that we may be losing in funding, but I will come back with that information once we have that and once the application process is complete. COC lead agency staff and the funding committee are closely monitoring information from HUD and working very hard to shepherd the COC and applicants for this funding through the process, which has been confusing and is on a much more compressed timeline than we have seen in regular funding cycles in years past. And as I said, I will continue to share updates on our community's application and the implications of these changes as we go through the process and continue learning more. Any questions about that before I move on?
Just, yeah, looking at the priorities, so with the changes, and I get that it's in a flux, y'all are trying to figure that all out, but with these priorities, are we well positioned to utilize the funding that is available for transitional housing, supportive services, and required treatment programming?
I think that we, like all communities, are doing the best we can to position ourselves as strongly as possible. Because the timeline is a little bit compressed, that means that individual applicants have been compressed in their timelines to submit for projects. But the funding committee and the COC board have been working very hard to design an application process that would be as informative as possible for applicants and also encourage applications that will allow our community to utilize as much of this funding as possible.
Thank you.
Yeah. I wanted to share some additional funding updates for you all as well. So the process for the Emergency Solutions Grant funding is currently open. This is funding that is managed by the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. It's annual funding utilized in our community for homelessness emergency response and housing stability activities. This year, the available funds from this source is $130,000. Applications are due August 24th, and we anticipate receipt of notification of awards in the fall of this year. Also wanted to share an update on the Right at Home Homelessness Prevention Partnership. So this is a national partnership and funding for some direct financial assistance to prevent homelessness in our COC. Our region, the Asheville region, was initially awarded $5 million for this project, and after reviewing the local cost of living and hearing concerns from providers who may participate, the national partnership asked that we aim to serve only 1,000 households and awarded an additional $1 million to the Asheville region for this project. So there's now a total of $6 million available. And so the project charter and the draft operations manual were approved by the board in June, and an RFA was released to the COC with applications for that due August 14th. And we are anticipating that program will launch in November of this year.
And Lacey, can you speak some more about that program specifically and what we're hoping to achieve and
Absolutely, yeah. So the Right at Home Homelessness Prevention Partnership is a group of national organizations that are looking to replicate a pilot that was successful in California in different communities across the country. And our community was selected as a result of some of the after effects of Hurricane Helene, and also because of the affordability difficulties that we've been trying to tackle. And the idea is that this will be flexible funding for households that are at risk of homelessness due to non-payment of rent, but also due to perhaps other circumstances that are preventing them from being able to generate more income. And so there has been I would say, a little over a year-long process now, working with the national partnership to design a program pretty specific to our COC and our needs. A lot of hard work has gone into it, and I'm excited about it because it is going to be, it's a wider catch for folks who are experiencing housing instability than some of the more traditional homelessness prevention assistance we've seen. And there's a lot of research that has supported that flexible funding model has been very helpful for folks in need.
Well, that sounds very promising, because we know we definitely, if we can prevent people then from becoming homeless.
Absolutely.
On that end, that's the best scenario.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. And then last but not least, I wanted to share that City Council has approved a planning grant for the city's CDBG DR funding to continue COC efforts at emergency shelter planning. So this grant will allow for some contracting to increase project management capacity. The City of Asheville's homelessness strategy team is working with the CDBG DR team on administrative compliance steps currently, and then there will be a request for proposals issued for a contracted project manager to join their team and support the emergency shelter development work group. And so once this request for proposals is developed, it will be published to the COC membership. I don't have a more specific timeline on that just yet.
Lacey, just a quick question, jumping back to Right at Home. So, now that we have a kind of a one-stop shop for general support for folks who need bill assistance or rent assistance, is the county potentially in a position to apply for that, or will we not want to do that given the already overwhelming need in the community?
I would defer to our Health and Human Services Director, but I would say, the request for applications is open to the COC now. I think they're looking to start with a small cohort of providers for the first year and then expand it out. We're certainly eligible to apply. But I will also say there is a pretty significant case management component for this funding. And there's a large need for staffing capacity for providers that will participate because those case managers will be working very closely with those households to address needs and then follow up with them for a period of time afterward to make sure that they are maintaining that stability. Other questions? All right. I wanted to update you all on the Salvation Army's Center of Hope Shelter. This is located at 204 Haywood Street. This is their emergency shelter for unhoused individuals. They are planning to pause shelter operations. Originally, they were planning for October 1st. It has been pushed back to November 1st. So that means that 65 shelter beds nightly in our community will be offline beginning November 1st. There is intent to reopen the shelter within 6 months, but this is contingent upon the success of ongoing efforts to secure operational funding. Salvation Army leadership has identified that in order for the shelter to operate at its current capacity, and with all of the supportive services that they currently offer, their annual operating budget is approximately $1.2 million. The COC has been leading conversations with the Salvation Army on this to try to identify solutions to prevent the loss of those beds. The chairs of the funding committee and the system planning and implementation committee have met with lead agency staff and organizational leadership to brainstorm on funding sources and also provide support as needed in pursuing those funding sources. And additionally, the Salvation Army is currently exploring opportunities to utilize this site in partnership with the COC for the upcoming Code Purple season. Those conversations are ongoing as part of that planning process for Code Purple this year. The COC board has been receiving and will continue to receive regular updates on this and has also requested materials that they could share out with our networks for awareness and to attempt to garner some support. And of course, I'm happy to answer any questions about this and will continue to update on this as I have more information. Questions about the Salvation Army?
And now the Army is going to close, it will remain open until November,
That's correct, yeah.
and we're getting no support from them nationally.
The structure of the national organization is such that they provide funding support for, I think, administrative tasks, but they do not typically provide funding support for shelter operations. With that being said, I will say that the local Salvation Army leadership has been in close contact with regional organizational leadership. I think there is a concerted effort there to try to support the local chapter and figuring out a solution as well.
And I was just going to ask regarding that $6 million partnership. Regarding the $6 million partnership award you mentioned earlier regarding prevention, can you just give us an example of what kind of activities that money would go to help?
Sure. So homelessness prevention is so for example, if a household, in this instance, if a household, there is a head of household who has a job and they have a significant car repair that they are unable to pay for themselves, and that would prevent them from getting to their job to continue to generate income. The prevention partnership may be able to assist in that instance, as well as instances where there is an eviction already in process or a household has been given a 30-day notice to vacate, or instances where, for example, there is just an unexpected expense, or a household is aware that there's some sort of extenuating circumstance that would prevent them from paying their rent each month. So it's not designed for folks who are already experiencing homelessness. It is designed to be kind of more upstream than that in the system.
I kind of think that where the money's there, if the program administrators can find a use for it, kind of, if there's a need, it's there. That sort of thing. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what led me to think through our general assistance program and how that could interplay with this, at least coordinating between the two, because there's some folks get discouraged that they call one, there's no connection there, but.
Yeah.
And with that, because you mentioned there's a really heavy case management aspect to this program, so which organizations do we have several organizations that are well positioned to have that kind of case management capacity?
There's been a lot of engagement with provider organizations kind of throughout this planning process on the part of the lead agency. So I think they have done a lot of assessment of the capacity of our organizations and talked with the national partnership about that. The request for applications is open currently, so I will not have information about who has applied or who may be selected until that process is closed and the board has made some recommendations.
I understand. Yes, I'm just hopeful, especially when you're talking about that level of case management. And to your point, people get very frustrated when they have to call multiple places. And I just hope we have
Absolutely.
organizations that are prepared to make this successful for our community.
And a variety of providers have been part of the planning and design process for this program as well. So definitely those capacity concerns have been taken into account in the design of the program itself. So,
Okay, thank you.
any additional questions about the Salvation Army? All right. And then last but not least, wanted to share some updates on other board actions over the last quarter. I am pleased to share that the board has approved the implementation of the plan for compensation for people with lived experience for their work in COC committees and on the board. Lead agency staff are currently working on details related to implementation of that plan now, and hopefully that will be up and running very soon. The board also adopted a funding policy that provides specific details defining processes for all of the funding committee's activities. So lots of information for the funding committee on various application processes for funding, as well as how to handle conflicts of interest during application cycles and things like that. The board has also approved the moving on preference with HACA. So there are 50 vouchers with HACA for this preference, and they are designed for households that are housed with a federal rental subsidy that is expiring, like emergency housing vouchers, or households that meet the COC's criteria for graduation from a supportive housing intervention, meaning that household no longer requires supportive services to remain stable in housing, but may continue to need the subsidy in housing. So providers support households who are eligible for this preference through the HACA application process. And this is a really good thing for our community because it helps with the flow through our system as well, so that we then will have, hopefully, ideally, additional slots available for permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing for other households who are experiencing homelessness. In order to comply with some specific requirements in the HUD Notice of Funding Opportunity that is currently open, The board and the COC membership have approved the creation of an additional board seat for an elected official from the criminal or legal system. And recruiting efforts for that seat are underway now. And then, of course, the board continues to add members for established committees and work groups when it's appropriate. You have a question?
Sorry, Avril and I were looking at each other thinking, who would that just be?
It
DA
would,
Moore, or, but I guess.
could be DA Moore, could be a sheriff, or I would imagine the sheriff could elect to designate perhaps a representative, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
or judge, yeah. Good point.
Yeah, or it could be a judge, that's correct, yeah.
Or clerk of court. Okay.
Yeah. And because applications for committees are open on a rolling basis in the COC, we continue to approve additional members for those committees and work groups. And then I wanted to just share some information about upcoming meetings. In lieu of a traditional membership meeting, this month there is a Tunnel Road Community Cleanup this Thursday, July 23rd, starting at 1 p.m. There will be teams of COC members and partners out on Tunnel Road helping just with trash pickup and general cleanup in the area. The COC board will have a special called virtual meeting on August 10th. That is so that we can comply with requirements outlined in that HUD COC NOFO as far as our timeline. So that virtual meeting will be specifically about our community's application for that funding. And then we will have our regular monthly board meeting later that same week on August 13th. The special meeting is virtual and the regular monthly board meeting in August will be in person. And with that, I'm happy to answer any additional questions you all may have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. You've got to help me out because my wife is doing away with lettuce right now. And I
Your
love
wife
it.
is very
I
smart.
love it.
Thank you all for giving me some time to update you on the current evolving cyclospora outbreaks going on across the country. Let's first start with what is it? So a quick overview, cyclosporiasis is an intestinal illness caused by a parasite called Cyclospora. This parasite can only be seen with a microscope. People get sick after they eat or drink food or water that is contaminated with this parasite. North Carolina is among the dozens of U.S. states experiencing an increase of cases this summer. The main signs and symptoms, which I'm sure you have heard lots in the media, but it is watery diarrhea with frequent bowel movements. And people usually start feeling sick about 1 week after they are exposed to the parasite. Some other symptoms that go along with it, we see loss of appetite, weight loss, stomach cramps and pain, bloating, increased gas, nausea, fatigue. Some people may also experience vomiting, body aches, headache, fever, flu-like symptoms. We don't see those quite as much, but they can occur. And then it is possible for someone to be infected and not show any symptoms. It is not transmitted person to person. You're eating something that's been contaminated or drinking something that's been contaminated with the parasite. So next, let's look at some of the data. So starting nationally, it is very important that you understand this CDC data has not been updated since July 13th. So there's a week lag. Lots have happened in this last week. So these cases are very far behind, which the CDC, is aware of, and they're working with the states to get these cases updated as quickly as possible. But As of July 13th, the CDC was reporting 1,645 cases, 141 hospitalizations, and 0 deaths. So that's great. The CDC, state, and other federal partners, the FDA, are working together to investigate several different outbreaks. I'm sure that you have been hearing, and if you have not, there's reports of a multi-state outbreak that does not include North Carolina, but involves Taco Bell and Taylor Farm lettuce. I'm sure you've seen that in the media. So while there have not been any confirmed positive samples of shredded iceberg lettuce from Taylor Farms by the FDA, their investigation still suggests that shredded iceberg lettuce could be a source of the parasite in the Midwest outbreak. So Taylor Farms has done a voluntary recall of iceberg lettuce produced at their Central Mexico facility. The recalled product is in numerous states, and that does include North Carolina. So at this time, you should not eat iceberg lettuce from Taylor Farms. And if you go to the FDA website, there's a detailed description of the recall, including all the different brand names that Taylor lettuce utilizes. It's a lot. It is vast. So do not eat iceberg lettuce from Taylor Farms at this time. And then as of July 20th, so yesterday, North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services was reporting 561 cases and 16 hospitalizations and 0 deaths. So as you can see, we don't have half of the national cases. The CDC is 1 week behind. These increase in cases in North Carolina does not appear to be associated with the outbreak in the states involving Taylor Farms lettuce and Taco Bell, even though Taylor Farms lettuce is sold here. So
Can I pause you to ask you how we would know that?
it is ongoing investigation. It may be identified later as this progresses that cases here could be linked to the Taylor Farm lettuce because it is sold in North Carolina. So currently the investigation that's happening in North Carolina, the information that we have, it does suggest things like parsley, cilantro, and lettuce. So it is very possible we could learn that later, but as of this moment, we don't see that it's linked there. Because once again, while this can show that this produce might be likely contaminated, it certainly does not prove with any certainty. So lots more investigation to come. Unfortunately, this parasite is very hard to identify, and people don't start experiencing symptoms till much later. So if I was doing an interview with you and doing your food history, I don't know about you, I can't even remember what I ate yesterday, much less 10 to 12 days ago. So it can be very difficult. And then as of today at noon, Buncombe County is reporting 4 cases, 0 hospitalizations, and 0 deaths, which is great. And for a little bit of context, in 2025, we reported 1 case. In 2024, we reported 4 cases for the whole year. In 2023, 1 case. So that is pretty typical. We're not far out of typical for Buncombe County right now, but as we've sort of seen, things have been rapidly increasing. So.
Excuse me, you said for the whole year, that year. When did we start tracking?
This says since May the 1st, this is also, we have only had 4 this year as well. Yes. This May 1st was when sort of this whole outbreak across the country has been identified, and CDC is counting from, as well as North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. All right, so in light of this situation locally and across the country, let's look at our priorities here for Buncombe County and public health. So our communicable disease team is conducting enhanced surveillance by tracking and reporting cases locally. These are also reported to North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, which reports to the Center for Disease Control. The CD nurses are doing the interviews, which includes the food history to identify any exposures and potential sources. Communications, our medical directors in communication with local medical providers with guidance on testing and treatment. Coordination, we're in close contacts with our state and federal agencies to understand and have awareness of the most up-to-date findings. And then education, our environmental health team is out working with food establishments, providing education around food safety and hygiene. And then finally, in partnership with our CAPE department, we did issue a press release at the end of last week with guidance for the public. So next, we will look at the specific guidance for the public. So the following actions are recommended for the general public, and people with immunocompromising conditions should pay extra attention. You want to wash all of your produce very well under running water. And if you have firm items, you can gently scrub them. And then remove any outer leaves of leafy greens and discard any bruised areas. And while these actions do not eliminate the risk, they are very, very helpful, as well as they can also help prevent against other foodborne illnesses such as salmonella. Cooking your produce will significantly reduce the risk of illness here. So cooking it to 154 degrees and above can kill the parasite. So now I know it's summertime and everybody wants their wonderful veggies, but if possible, cooking them is beneficial. And then, of course, you should always use good hand hygiene. Wash your hands for 20 seconds before eating, preparing food, and after using the restroom. And then finally, make sure you're staying hydrated. We all know there's also heat illness happening right now. And then, of course, you want to seek care if you are having persistent diarrhea and stay home if you're sick. There is treatment for cyclosporiasis. There is an antibiotic treatment. So it's important to contact your provider if you are experiencing that persistent diarrhea. And so to close out, the key takeaway messages here: cyclosporiasis is a seasonal parasitic illness with increasing national state cases. Symptoms typically appear about a week after exposure. Frequent watery diarrhea is the most common symptom. Currently, Buncombe County has 4 cases, 0 hospitalizations, and 0 deaths. Our public health response is centered on surveillance, investigation, and education. The community should properly wash their produce, cook produce when practical, practice good hand hygiene, and currently do not eat Taylor Farms recalled iceberg lettuce. Please stay home when you're sick and seek medical attention for persistent watery diarrhea. Questions?
Is it contagious? And if it is, what is the mode of transport? Or is it just by eating it?
It is by eating contaminated
So I
food
think
or
it's
drink,
from-
so you're not going to spread it person to person. Yes.
And you said food and drink?
Yes, a drink could be contaminated. It's typically, though, produce. This is a seasonal illness. We do typically see cases every year right around this time. It usually will start to trend down around September when it's getting colder and the parasite just can't reproduce as much.
And we can only get it by consuming it, but just to, so I'm clear, I understand what our wonderful media has told me is true. It's only through fecal matter. Like, fecal matter has to be on the object you're consuming.
Yes, that's where the parasite has been, yes.
It can't like be on the food, but not also in fecal matter of some kind. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so usually like in production facilities, in these large farms, when they're watering, that is how it gets into and on the produce. And then and, you know, we have so many different processing facilities. Something can get contaminated and then it contaminates a bunch of other things.
Gets in the, like fecal matter gets in the water in some way.
It can get in the water or just the way they're processing on the machines, it's transmitting it to different food items.
Yeah. I guess what I'm trying to get at is like, you go to the store, the farmer's market or whatever, it's not like the vegetables are sharing this by rubbing elbows with each other. Like it has to be out in fecal matter and get on the thing.
Yes.
Somehow.
So typically, like right now, we're not as concerned with local farms because they're not going through large production facilities,
Yeah.
such as what's happening with Taylor Farms.
Buy
I don't know
local
that I'm
from
answering.
your farmers.
Because that gets to the question I had was, do we know yet if it's, you know, one or a handful of producers that are impacted, they're impacted in spreading this? Or is this, you know, growing among a lot of different producers? Or if we can, hopefully eventually kind of identify the one or a handful?
Yeah, so it's just gonna take more investigation. Currently, the only one where it's highly likely is with the Taylor Farms, and so thankfully, they have done a voluntary recall because there's no positive test. But that does not mean that's not where it's coming from. There are many different outbreaks, sort of pockets of this happening across the nation. So through this investigation, more sources could absolutely be identified.
But to reiterate, we were less concerned about local, small-scale farms that you typically find at a local farmer's market.
Correct, because they're not going through large distribution facilities, things like that. Now, would I encourage people to continue to wash their produce? Absolutely. You still want to do that. There's many other foodborne illnesses that can occur. And, you know, we do utilize within like compost material, there is fecal matter. So washing your produce regardless of this is always going to be a good idea.
My last question is about symptoms. I'm sure, tell me if I'm wrong, like everything. I'm sure it's like everything else, like the severity of the symptoms can depend on the person and who knows what else. But when I look at your list of symptoms, like I have a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, so that's just an average Tuesday, or a couple hours on an average Tuesday, and then they're better, right? So is there any, I guess just to the extent a parent or anyone else should be concerned about this extra than anything else, is there any other way to?
Yeah, this is going to last. The diarrhea is going to last more than that, like you said, couple of hours or 1 to 2 days. Norovirus is an example of something that people get where it has watery diarrhea component. That typically lasts 2 days. This can last weeks, months. I want you to go get care well before months have happened. So it would be noticeable that it is significantly longer. Dehydration is the main concern here, and it is treatable with an antibiotic. And so I would encourage anyone, like, if they're concerned this is out of my norm, or if it's lasting well beyond 2 or 3 days, contact their medical provider. Anything else? I get all the fun stuff. Thanks.
Do you have anything? Do we have anything else, you know?
I have one thing, Commissioner Whitesides. Sharon Decker on Friday at the Helene event in Boone brought up the idea of disaster opportunity zones. And from what I know about just regular opportunity zones from my day job, my ears perked up. It sounded great to me at first glance, at first thought. And so I guess I bring that up to you, Avril, and my colleagues to see if maybe there's interest in the staff doing an email or a small briefing on it. Just because where my head goes next is maybe we want to send a letter to our congressional delegation in favor of that idea. And I can't think of a reason to not be for it, but maybe staff might
I can't think of a reason not to be for it.
Yeah.
I read the article about her asking the federal government to designate disaster opportunity zones.
Yeah.
And I haven't talked to anyone. I just read the article,
Yeah.
while I was waiting for my plane.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I wanted to follow up with NCACC as well as EM, North Carolina EM, and see what they were thinking as well. I'm assuming she's speaking on their behalf, so assuming they were supporting it. But
Yeah.
I wanted to ask and verify that, and we can do some research and bring them back.
I think it requires congressional approval. I think they have to
It
approve
does.
a list of census tracts.
It
And if
does.
that's all true and we like it, I would propose that we send anyone and everyone a letter of,
Okay.
asking them to do it. So,
We'll take a look at it and see. And I noticed that she was referencing other storms and what they have done in reaction to other storms, from Helene, and all staff back there is nodding. So this is not a new thing that we're asking for. It's just that the federal government hasn't done it yet for Helene, so
okay.
she was raising that flag.
So they've done it for other disasters?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
And New Katrina, right? I think it
And
was.
others since then.
Okay.
Yeah, ever since then.
Okay.
Yeah, that came up from a subcommittee in the Western North Carolina Committee. Yeah.
Jennifer, can you share that article? Where was it? I thought so. They're gonna make me
Good
buy a
point.
subscription, huh?
We have anything else to come up? We have a motion to adjourn?
So
So
moved.
moved.
Yeah.
Second. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Technical